All right, we're live. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to Love Sweet Arrow for hosting this conversation. And thank you to Adriana, Tracy, and Susan for joining me. We are tonight going to talk about television, which is something that I think we all could definitely talk for an hour or longer about, and specifically how that intersects with romance writing, since that's what we all do. So I will start with our bios and then get into a little bit about what we're going to discuss tonight, and then we'll just jump right into the questions. So I'm Alexis Daria, but I'm going to start with Adriana because she's first on my list of the bios here. So USA Today bestselling author Adriana Herrera was born and raised in the Caribbean, but for the last 15 years has let her job and her spouse take her all over the world. She loves writing stories about people who look and sound like her people, getting unapologetic happy endings. When she's not dreaming up love stories, planning logistically complex vacations with her family, or hunting for discount Broadway tickets, she's a trauma therapist in New York City working with survivors of domestic and sexual violence. One of her latest releases is A Caribbean Heiress in Paris. There's also On the Hustle, which I realize I don't have my copy. So you should check that one out too. Then we have Susan Lee. Susan has had a lifetime of careers from bartender to network engineer to HR executive at some of today's most successful companies. But one thing has always been clear throughout. She was born to be a storyteller. Very true. And she has channeled her myriad of experiences into her writing of lighthearted, quirky novels about the oftentimes hilarious human condition. And love, always love. She currently lives in Southern California, fighting her inner New Yorker from breaking free too often, with a pack of 3 feisty chihuahuas and a too hearty obsession with K-pop and K-dramas. And Susan's latest release is Soulmates. Tracy Livesey's latest release, American Royalty, which I have right here, is a dangerously sexy rom-com that evokes the real-life romance between Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan Markle, if Meghan was Megan Thee Stallion, and was one of the most buzzed about books of 2022. She's the 2021 Emma Award winner for Best Interracial Romance for Like Lovers Do, which was also named one of the 100 Best Fiction Books of 2020 by Kirkus Reviews. A former criminal defense attorney, Tracy lives in Virginia with her husband and is counting down the days until they have an empty nest. Don't worry, their 3 kids are well aware. And then there's me. I'm Alexis Daria, the award-winning and international bestselling author of You Had Me at Hola, A La Like Adios, What the Hex, and more. I'm trimming my own bio as we speak. A former visual artist, Alexis is a lifelong New Yorker who loves Broadway musicals and pizza. True, I had pizza for lunch today. Her next release is out now. I need to update this. Special edition of my debut novel, Take the Lead, and it's now out in print with a fresh edit to the text. So that's who we are. And what are we doing tonight? Tonight, we're going to talk about TV and romance. I brought us together because we all just talk about TV a lot to each other, separately of the writing stuff.
Very true.
But we also have written books inspired by TV and the entertainment industry. And not just in terms of like watching something and then being inspired to write a story like that thing, but actually having characters who are actively involved in the industry. So we're going to make a lot of recommendations tonight. So I recommend that you have a notepad handy or some other sort of note-taking device. And we will get started. One of the things I was thinking about was that this can be about the ways that TV helps our writing instead of hurting it because we're too busy watching television and not getting our work done. So it's also kind of
that's just rude, Alexis.
I know.
Why did you go
that.
there? That's how we're going to start this thing. I'm just kidding.
No, it's true. It's true.
Industry secrets.
Right. But it's also a craft discussion in disguise.
True.
So surprise, everyone.
Research.
It's totally work. So let's start with talking about inspiration, because I think there are different ways that we can get inspiration from TV and at different points in the writing process. So I will call on people because I think that makes it easier because we can't make eye contact on a Zoom call. But tell us about where you find that TV inspires your process and give some examples. So Susan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I have shared this before, but I did not grow up as a reader. So I just was not a reader as a kid. I actually was a latchkey kid. I don't even know if we still use that term, but I'd come home after school and my babysitter was soap operas. So I have always kind of had this active imagination and daydreaming about characters and kind of writing in my head fan fiction of everything I watched on TV. So I have long been a television person, and even the things that I remember seeing with my parents way back in the day, like miniseries like Roots and Shogun, and just really like epic miniseries, which they don't really have those anymore. I don't feel like, but and then my parents always had K dramas on in the background. I mean, it was literally the background soundtrack of my youth, and so I feel like the way that I learned how to even creatively think about people's lives outside of my own very small lived experience was whatever I saw on the screen. And seeing it like daily, not like when you make a trip to the movies, it's like it was always on. Um, yeah, so I feel like I had always just learned how to be inspired by little tidbits of conversation or dialogue I'm hearing, or bananas over the top, storylines that you see in soap operas. So yeah, and to this day, I'm inspired by those same things. Like I could talk for hours about Days of Our Lives or old primetime like Dallas and Dynasty, and of course now these days just all of the greater distribution of K dramas like on Netflix. I love to be able to discuss those things.
And you should definitely follow Susan on Instagram because she always includes in her Instagram stories K-drama recommendations. So speaking of soaps, Tracy, I know that you also are a soap watcher. So why don't you take it away?
Answering the question about inspiration or okay. So I think one of the things we learn as you write and you're in the community is that we all sort of do things differently. I am definitely much um, a very type A type person in that I like to plan things out. Um, I do not like to sit down with no idea of where I'm going or what I'm doing. And so the way sort of TV, especially, inspires me is like in the brainstorming process. Like I know I have this couple, I have an idea of what types they're supposed to be. And so the first thing I think of is, okay, what TV show or what movie has characters that are these types? And then I might need a day or two to watch, these movies and TV shows. It's just work. I mean, it's part of my process. It's work that has to be done. Someone has to do it. And so, I do it. And so it really sort of helps and informs my character work and the interaction that they'll have between each other, sort of as I'm getting ready to write the first draft. And then it comes back when it's time for me to edit or revise that draft, because by that point, I know my characters really well. Maybe the archetype they were before I started writing has shifted and changed. Maybe their wound has changed or their background has changed, but I know them much better now. And so I'm able to then sort of really narrow in or focus in on who they are and what I have written their interaction to be. And so then it's another round of, okay, is there another show or movie that's better for, these characters now? And what is that? And I do need to take another couple days and do that research and watch that too before I get into the revision or edit process. So, it's all throughout my process: TV, movies, pop culture. It's all there.
And Adriana, how about you? At what points in the process do you find inspiration from TV?
I take one thing I stimulated or television or by books, but I'm kind of like Sarah Simone coined a panty liner, which is like not a pantser, but like also I'm a pantser and an outliner. So like I can't plot because plotting like completely messes me up. And I'm kind of a pantser, but I also do outlines. So I'm a panty liner. So at every like 2 or 3 chapters in my drafting process, I have to like reset everything that I'm doing. And throughout that time, I have to like be like taking in different things that's kind of like helping me figure out the story. Like for this last book that I wrote, which feels like I've been writing my whole life, but it was only 7 months. Island Princess, which is the second book in Las Leonas. It's historical romance. And it's also like a queer couple. So it's 2 women. So I had like these 2 different things that I needed to be consuming, like kind of like the trappings of like a historic piece where there's like the dresses and all of that, but also like a lesbian couple. So I was watching a lot of the show Gentleman Jack, which is based, like it's an HBO show that is based on like this like real life woman who lived in like the 1830s, who was like out and a lesbian. And so that helped me so much in terms of like figuring out like how she walked, how she dressed, like how she kind of like moved in society. And then I could watch a bunch of like Miss Scarlet and the Duke, which is also kind of set around this time that that my book is set. It's in London, but also like the heroine is like kind of like it's like a strong female lead and things like that. So I was like going back and rewatching episodes of both of those shows to kind of just like figure out little details that wouldn't have occurred to me when you're like in the depths of the writing, like things like I need to be thinking about like how did they like move in a room full of men, like things like that. So in my case, at all points, I'm like kind of like taking in shows or books.
Yeah, I was thinking that there's also the intentional, right? Like I'm about to start drafting, so let me seek out other things that are similar to what I'm writing so that I can like spark more ideas. But then there's also the unintentional, like, I was watching Teen Wolf. I watched like 3 seasons of Teen Wolf at one point because I had like a really bad sinus infection and a fever and I was so sick. I was like, okay, let me get into the show. This was years ago. And while watching it in this like feverish haze, I was like, what if so-and-so had a secret baby? And that's who's knocking on the door right now in this scene. And I wrote a whole book based on that what if scenario that popped into my head. That book hasn't gone anywhere, obviously. But it's those kinds of like serendipitous moments of inspiration, that little flash of what if, and then of course there's stuff like when I was writing You Had Me at Hola, there's a show within a show for that one. And I had already written, a couple of the dance-off books by that point. And I just kind of was like, oh, I'll just write it the same way I wrote those, in terms of being on set. And then I quickly realized that wasn't going to work because filming a live show is very different from filming a scripted show where they're like stopping and starting. Excuse me. So I had to look to other things that had a show within a show to see how they did it. And once I was able to figure that out, then I was able to continue with the book. But it really did take me figuring out that piece. So it was stuff like the Eva Longoria show, Telenovela, where they are filming a telenovela, and also Broadway shows, Kiss Me Kate and Moulin Rouge, which are also based on movies and stuff, but where they do that show within a show, like how do they do those scenes? And then there were just other points in the process, like we said. I was thinking how last year, I think it was, unless it was the year before, because I really can't remember anymore. Adriana and Zoraida Cordova and I all read this book called From Hollywood with Love by Scott Meslow, which is like an oral history of rom-coms in Hollywood. And it's fascinating. And that prompted all of us to start like, watching all these classic rom-coms and then talking about them together. And that just like gets you thinking about these story beats and it helps inform your own work. So there's another book rack. So let's talk about TV around the world, right? Because we just, even here in terms of our own watching, we kind of cover everything from Latin American telenovelas to Korean dramas to Japanese anime to American soap operas. And all of those shows kind of have, or those types of shows or formats have like their own structural things to them, and archetypes and tropes. So how does watching, different types of media and different formats of television inform your writing and affect your writing? So we'll start with Adriana this time.
So that's an interest. I was like, this is a great question. So I grew up watching Latin American telenovelas, like a lot of people did, and I've talked about this before, but like in my case, it was literally like the family business. My dad's business was acquiring like broadcasting rights for shows so that they could be broadcasted in the Dominican Republic, and he was like, his main thing that he did was telenovela. So my entire childhood, we watched my dad's soaps on TV every single night. And my mom worked with him. She was the one that sold the advertising time for him. So it was literally her job to be able to sell the telenovela. So she watched them, and she has like this like encyclopedic like knowledge of like 80s and 90s telenovelas, and she could tell you exactly what it was that sold any of the big hits. And so I've thought a lot about obviously like the format of telenovelas, and now like during the pandemic, as many of us did, I really got into K-dramas because they were on Netflix and they were amazing. And to me, like it's been interesting to like kind of like compare the difference in terms of the storytelling that happens because to me, like I've kind of thought about it a lot, like in Latin American telenovelas, it's like the long drawn out thing in terms of like a ton of episodes. It feels more like an epic. And then you have like the American soap, which is just like an ongoing thing that just like goes on forever, like for 40 years. And it's really kind of like seasonal. Like each season they come up with like a big bad or some kind of like overarching like plot point. And then with the K-drama, like to me, what's been fascinating to watch about, because to me, the K-drama almost feels like they've gone back and looked at every single kind of soap opera and they've diluted it. Like they've like not concentrated it and made it like the perfect capsules. Because to me, it's almost like they figure out a way to make that like soap opera format like in its like best version. And it's because I feel like they really hone in on the beat of a romance. And I think for like viewership, just because like in terms of production, like, it's kind of like once you've got the sets, once you've got the actors, like drawing it out so you have more viewership, like it makes sense to make something 150 episodes because you have people watching for 8 months. But with the K-drama, I feel like making each episode essentially a movie where you can really kind of like hone in of one of the beats of a love story. Feels to me like, I mean, I don't know anything about how they're thinking about K-dramas, but to me, it feels like they've really kind of like truly honed in on what makes like a beat of like the importance of each beat of a romance and kind of like slowing it down. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but
It does. Susan, I feel like the ball just got handed to you. So why don't you take this question?
Yeah, I think what has been the best part about watching so many romance readers get into K-dramas is kind of this like finally finally, because honestly what's so interesting is Koreans as a culture, we are creatures of habit. We want things very traditional. You want, no surprises. Like we love the expected. And so with a K-drama, you're going to get a very similar formula every time. And it's funny when people bash on romance and they're like, oh, it's these same tropes over and over. And we're like, yeah, that's why we read them. We love the familiarity of the trope and knowing that we're going to get something, but we can get it fresh with a new voice. It's very similar with K-dramas. K-dramas, you're always going to have kind of like this cliffhanger of an ending every episode, and the next episode is going to start with a replay of that, what happened, you know, the episode before. You're going to get a very chaste first kiss, like at episode 8, and then on episode 9, all hell breaks loose. Someone's going to get hit by a car and levitate in the air for 2 seconds. It's going to start raining, and you're not going to have an umbrella, and you're the person you have a crush on is going to show up with an umbrella. You're going to walk away, and that guy's going to reach out and grab your forearm. It is literally like it is a formula, and that's why we love it. And so I can totally see why romance readers have really gotten into it, because we love watching formula being done in new and fresh ways, but with that basis, you know. And so I think it's great what Adriana was saying is, I have actually, since I started writing, have I've been watching K-dramas for years, but I never realized that while I was watching it, you know, I just was watching it as entertainment. But as I started writing, I didn't realize how it was making me a better storyteller, because I'll ask those same things, like, you know, did I escalate tension here? Does every scene have a purpose, you know? And it's okay if I want to revisit that scene from a different perspective, or it just it reminds me of how to tell story. And so I typically try to find a K-drama that has a very similar trope to what I'm writing, and then like we'll watch for those beats as I'm writing the story, like Adriana was talking about. So you nailed it, Adriana. That's exactly, I feel like they really condensed and made everything kind of this canned version of everything you get, like in the kinds of entertainment that you consume. That's why it feels sometimes so over the top when you first start watching it. And then when you like dig your heels and are like, okay, now I'm okay with this, you know? So, but you're absolutely right.
I think what you said also, like, it reminds you how to tell a story. Like I do sometimes wonder if that is not something that happens to other people, but like the people who don't write, like I forget how to write a book, like every time. You know, I always think like, okay, this is going to get easier, right? This job is going to get easier. And every single time I'm like, how do you write a book? How do you write a story? You know, and at different points in the process too, right? You turn the book in, then you get back to edit it and you're like, oh, what am I doing? What is this? Right? Every single time. So it's almost like a crash course in like, this is what a story is, to go back to one of those shows and watch through it and like get that reminder. So Tracy, how do you find that different forms of media help inform your writing, or even in terms of like the archetypes that you're using in the characters?
So I grew up watching American soap operas. I have to check out because, like Adriana said, it's like 40 years. So, you sort of go in and out at different points of time, but they really were sort of instrumental in terms of my writing. And so when I look back at sort of what I learned from them, there are things like you have time to tell a story, because they would drag stuff out. Like a day would be a week, right? Like they would drag stuff out. So, I have time to tell a story. There's no sort of rush, especially on really sort of important moments. Like important moments could take a week, and then other things they could skip over, like between one commercial and the next. So just sort of learning pacing and timing. They were really good. I'm going to put good in quotes, because they were good, but maybe they shouldn't have been good at redeeming characters. But part of that, of course, is letting us know sort of backgrounds of characters. So people aren't just one dimensional or even archetypes. They are actual people, and they have backgrounds, and they have wounds, and they have fears and joys, and all of that sort of comes together to make a character. And so there could be a character that you actually really hate when they first join the show, and maybe the year later you are in love with them and they're the main hero and in this new relationship that you didn't even know you wanted, but now like you're watching every day for it. And that was one of my favorite parts about soap operas. And I thought they were also really good about understanding how to create chemistry and tension between characters, because it's spread out over so many years. You can't like wham bam thank you ma'am like in the beginning. Like they've got to make that storyline like last a very long time. And I grew up as a CBS baby, and I do still check in on Young and the Restless and Bold and the Beautiful. But Twitter, God, it was Twitter, got me hooked on this one little young couple on General Hospital, #Sprina. If y'all are watching, I love y'all. But this couple has like not really been a couple, but people have been begging for them to be a couple for like years. I don't even watch the show, but I go on Twitter, and if the Sprina fans say today was a good day, I'll go watch the episode just to see what happened. Just so far, they're so good about that tension and that yearning. And then the other thing is, because I did watch a lot of CBS, for some reason, like Businessmen, it's like my jam, my hero jam. There's a review on my first book where the person said it read like a soap opera. And that was like the best compliment I was just like, yes, thank you. I've done my job. Done.
I have to have an anecdote for a American soap opera. So when I growing up, I would come every summer with my grandma to the States, and we would be here for like 2 months. And my grandma, who did not speak a word of English, loved Sonny from General Hospital. So we would watch it, and I would literally be telling her like what was happening, because they didn't even have closed captioning at that point. And the soap opera, so there was a character that was like pregnant or like announced a pregnancy when we were here like a summer, and we came back the next summer and she had just had the baby. And my grandmother could not believe it. She was like, it must be like the third child. And I'm like, I swear it's the same baby.
Yeah, let's stretch it out.
That was just like our cultural shock of like just how long things take on American soaps.
So I grew up with telenovelas on in the background, like Susan talked about having K-dramas on in the background, because my grandmother watched them. But it wasn't like a thing we did together. However, my babysitter was also a Puerto Rican grandmother, and she was a huge Young and the Restless fan. So when I was homesick from school, I would stay with her and we'd watch it together. And when I would go to her house after school, she would fill me in on what was happening with all the characters, with Vicky and Victor and Nikki and Phyllis. Oh my God, it's always about Phyllis. Like, she hated Phyllis.
All are still there, by the way. They are. Oh,
I'm sure. So I would hear all of that. And then I also watched a lot of shows I should not have been watching with my mom, like 90210 and Melrose Place. I was like 7 when these shows came out. And my mom was like, come on, it's time to watch 90210. But, as a result, between that and I watched a lot of anime, like a lot, because my dad would get all of those like subtitled tapes, like bootleg tapes. And between those two things, they really shaped a lot of my early writing, with like very like high drama and very complicated family dynamics from soap operas. And then also very like silly kind of slapstick stuff from some of the anime, but then also like these like moments of like intense romance. Like anytime they like hold hands or kiss, like the screen goes all pink and there's like sakura blossoms flying and like the music changes and it's all like soft and fuzzy. And then it like switches to something else, right? So those were the things that showed up a lot in my early writing. And I feel like I kind of trained myself out of that, because I felt like it, wasn't like good writing or whatever. And so thinking about that now, in the terms of this conversation, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to think more about like what I can keep from that and how to be intentional with it.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I I feel like, especially because I'm newer and like I'm literally just about to publish my second book, and I feel like very timid sometimes when I'm writing. Like I take myself too seriously.
Yeah.
And whenever I get into that point, one of the times that I realized it is when I was publishing my first book, and people ask you for a quote to sign with a quote, and I couldn't think of one quote that was like over the top dramatic, wonderfully one line that made it feel super romantic. And I just realized that like when I was writing, I would like sometimes cringe at the things I wanted to write because I'm like, oh no, that's so weird, or like it's too much. But then I'll watch things that are so over the top, emotional, tension, like, just bananas, and I'm invested. I'm all in. It's like it's a cultural moment. What happened when Luke and Laura got married, or when JR was shot. I mean, these are cultural moments, and how they explain some of this stuff away is like ridiculous, but we're all in, And
Yeah.
so when you're saying about how we have to remind ourselves, I really think that like the benefit for those of us who've kind of grown up with these kinds of shows is we have been exposed to really like kind of brave storytelling. I think I need to re-tap into some of that too sometimes.
Yeah, and not like hold back, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking also just in terms of like the way these shows are shot, right? Like, okay, there was a specific scene in a show recently that I was like, why would they make that scene so short? Like they should have, I'm not going to say what it was, but I'll tell you all later. And some of you probably already know what it is, but it was like this moment. And I was like, we're going to get this like big romantic like moment. And then it was just over. And I felt so let down. It's like popping a balloon, right? Like the tension builds and then it's just gone. And I was like, you know what? A K-drama would have shown that scene from like 12 different angles. Yeah. It would have been at the end of the episode and the beginning of the next episode. Yes. You would have got it from like, fast motion, slow motion, all of it. Or a CW show would have had like this crescendo of music and then like close camera angles, like, so some shows like know how to really do this. And then others, I'm like, are you embarrassed about like having romantic moments? So I think what that is showing me, like there's certain things, like I hate writing kissing, but I love reading a well-written kiss. And I'm like, oh, wow, this person writes this really well. So those are the kind of things where I'm like, okay, how can I slow these moments down even further? But not to the point where it ruins the pacing. But I think that that's something that we do in romance and what makes the genre special is that we slow down in those moments and really give you like every breath and every heartbeat and every touch. And I think really like sinking into that is a way that we can even, learn from this and also improve our own writing.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking about this today because I was talking to someone about romance, and to me, it's like I have to lean into the people that are here for it and not for the naysayers. Like, I'm not writing for the people that think romance is cheesy because whatever I do, they're not gonna like it. Yeah. But I'm here for the people that are still thinking. If anyone's watched Crash Landing on You, you haven't, you should. It's a K-drama that changed my life. Like I'm here for the people that are still thinking about Captain Reed talking to that plant and telling it 10 like nice words a day. Like that's what I'm here for. I'm here for people that remember those like ridiculous romance moments that are ridiculous because they are supposed to be, because like love is like larger than life. And I think to me, like that's the piece. Like I'm here for the people that still think about moments, about a book, or like about a movie they saw 20 years ago.
Let's all name a moment then, because I have on here the spoon licking moment from Bridgerton season 1 when he licks that spoon.
Oh, that's
okay. So and then we've got Captain Reed talking to the plant. I was also thinking for Crash Landing on You when he finally hugs her on the street in Seoul.
Oh,
when he comes back, and that hug lasts like 3 minutes.
My favorite moment from that show is the motorcycle moment, but we don't just.
But that's not a slightly different kind of romantic gesture. Okay, Tracy and Susan, what would you say as like an iconic romance moment? I know I'm putting you on the spot. This wasn't on the question list.
It's Susan. You go first.
Because Tracy doesn't like being put on the spot.
And if you can't, it's okay.
No, I mean, I've got to go from a K-drama. There's actually quite a few in nighttime soaps. Obviously, I just saw one on TikTok the other day about the OC. When Ben shows up. Anyways, like there's like a lot of those moments, but I just recently finished a series that I loved so much. Oh my God, I just forgot the name of it. What's the fantasy series that I loved so much?
Alchemy of Souls.
Alchemy of Souls. Oh my God, thank you. And in Alchemy of Souls, there is in part two, there is a kiss that he, like, you know, K-dramas are pretty tame, and the kisses are even the passionate ones are closed mouth, but this is a historical fantasy, and he grabs her and pushes her against a wall, and she's just like staring at him, and then they kiss. It is like, I mean, I think about that kiss. I mean, I can't stop thinking about that kiss. So that moment, yeah, that was a good one.
Okay, I have that to look forward to because I'm still not done with season 2.
Oh my
I'm also
God.
thinking of the moment in Buffy when she steps away and he's got the brand of the cross on his chest.
Oh God.
Like, talk about a seminal moment. Tracy, how about you?
I don't have any. I'm on the
that's
spot.
okay.
I can't.
If you come up with one later, feel free.
I have another one.
Yes, go. Yes.
I mean, if for anyone that reads historical, there's a book called Lord of Scoundrels by
have that in my notes.
Chase.
Loretta Chase.
Which is, I think, one of the greatest romances ever. But there's a moment, and it's also it's like a cafe moment where he is like taking off her glove, and he's like kind of like, it's a seduction moment. So he's like, and like it describes everything, that like every button, and like how she escalates that scene of like every button, how he like takes off every single one of the gloves of every single one of her fingers, and by the end of it, he's basically compromised himself, and now they have to get engaged. Like, it's honestly one of the greatest. And I listen. I have it bookmarked on the audiobook, and I listen to it like once a month.
I thought of something. I'm not kissing up to you because this is about Take the Lead, but I've talked about this a couple times. So that's why I'm going to mention it since Adriana went to books. But the scene where Gina goes to, I think it's his hotel room, and he answers the door and he's wearing a towel, and she looks at him and she can't remember what she was saying. And it's like a good page where she's just like, and he's enjoying it, and he knows that she, you know, is getting off on how hot he looks in the towel. That was one of the moments in that book that I've talked to several people about, because as I was thinking about sort of how I write and what I write, you know, I try to do a good job of showing that each person is attracted to the other person.
Oh, you do it really well, Tracy. Don't worry.
Yeah, no. But those scenes where you're in one person's point of view and the other person is attracted, and they know that the other person is attracted, like that's just like another level on top of it. And I just, you know, I really, that has stuck with me. So that's a scene that has stuck with me, just imagining her like looking at all of that and being like struck dumb by just how, yeah.
I have one more.
Okay, go for it.
Because we're doing.
I'm gonna have to go find that page.
I think Adriana would know this book, but there's a series called Adrian English by an author, Josh Lanyon. It's a male mystery, romance mystery, but two
My
scenes.
favorite,
I don't
honestly.
even know. It's not even. It's so funny. It's not even outwardly a romantic series, but has some of the most romantic moments I'll ever remember. But there is just a line I'll always remember, because one of the guys says, you know, you never say it. Why can't you say you love me? And the other guy, who's a stoic policeman,
Baby,
says,
I
love you,
fucking
worship you. Love you, of course I love you, baby. I fucking worship you. It is the best line ever. ever.
I've
And there's one
considered
other
getting a
scene-
tattoo of that line.
Oh my God, that line is like to die for. And there's one other scene where they're eating, they're talking to someone else. And in this scene, while they're not even talking to each other, they're talking to someone else across from the booth. One of the guys isn't eating. He doesn't like his food. And the other guy just switches plates with him they don't say anything. He just switches meals with him. I just think that kind of stuff is so ridiculously romantic that it hurts my soul. It's so good.
And with that, and I mean, talking kind of like about, I mean, I think that series specifically to me is one of those that could like be a TV show. Like it's
Yes.
very,
Oh, yeah.
it's written in a
It
way that's
reads like
very
a TV show,
cinematic.
yes.
And there's a lot of, because there's a of like and shows that she goes to kind of, but that moment, that line of I worship you, that's the 5th book of a 5-book arc. By the time we get that line, like we literally would die for both of them. Like it's a perfect example of like how you can really build. I think that's what you can do in a show. Like you can build over 5 books, this relationship that literally by the end, like I listened to that series 3 times a year, like all 5 books. I listened to them for the last like 10 years. And it's because like, it really is like listening to a show. Like the way she describes things and everything is very cinematic. I mean,
can I ask you guys a question? Sorry, nuts, because I feel like each of you has recently watched some of these, but what I find interesting is what's happening with kind of the popularity of serial dramas like K-dramas and telenovelas, all this stuff, and how internationally now they're crossing, nations and languages. I feel like this kind of storytelling now is making its way into docu-series like Harry and Meghan. I just saw the one called I forget, it's the golfing one about the PGA, and I was like every episode I'm like,
Susan,
it's real.
Susan,
Okay, so let's talk.
I legit told my family Netflix has got some shit on lock. I'm watching a documentary series about fucking golf.
Oh, golf, yes.
And I loved it.
I just finished Physical 100, the Korean Strength Man one.
Oh,
also, the storytelling arcs. It's not even just like a reality competition show. They have storytelling arcs that are blowing my mind. So can we talk about how this has kind of made its way into docu-series now too?
Yeah, because I think what was the first one you mentioned before the golfing one?
Meghan and Harry.
Meghan and Harry, yeah. So when Meghan and Harry came out, I was like, I know Tracy's mad that this did not come out 2 years ago.
It would have helped. It would have helped.
I think that even in reality shows and stuff like that, like the Physical 100, Tracy, Adriana, and I all watched the latest season of Dancing with the Stars and like had like a text group every Monday night where we would like, and I think that's why I like that show so much. Everyone's like, oh, you must really like dancing. And I'm like, yeah, I like dancing, but that's not why I watch the show, because I don't watch So You Think You Can Dance, because those people already know how to dance. I want to see the growth arc over the entire series. That is what sucks me in. It's them learning how to be vulnerable, people stepping out of their comfort zones, learning about themselves, crying, falling in love with themselves in different ways. Like that's what gets me. And I think that, this was a question I had on here, but I wasn't going to ask it because I didn't think we had time. But since we're kind of segueing into it, I think shows like this sometimes get a bad rap, like telenovelas and soap operas and rom-coms and romance novels, right? So how do we think all of that plays in along with this storytelling aspect that Susan is talking about in like these kind of docuseries? Like, do we think it's like changing the way people look at them, or do we think that maybe the production companies are taking these things more seriously?
I think it's been interesting. I was thinking about this the other day because Chef's Table to me is one of those shows that like really changed how you do television, because everybody, I mean, there was like Iron Chef and there were a lot of like shows before that were like doing a lot with like food and culinary like excellence. But to me, like, and it was a show that was very successful for Netflix, and it was specifically because it was the story of like the chef. It wasn't like just like, and I think to me, like it goes back almost to genre. Like I think now there's this genre of the human story behind a sport or the human story behind like a craft that compels people. Like you go to Netflix, like I think there's something, and again, it's like I think how like romance gets a bad rap because what do we work on? What's our craft? Relationships. It's like life. It's like the human story of like falling in love and like figuring out a future. And I think it's been interesting to see now how much TV is leaning into like kind of capturing the human stories and the relationships. And it's what's like what people want. I mean, other than true crime, which is like another Q&A, what's another panel, but like that piece of like really finding and really kind of going with beats, like the Meghan and Harry docu-series. There was like each episode was a beat of their love story, and like you felt it, you understood what they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think these what's happening is these stories are tapping into stories about relationships and emotions, right? Like you said. And those are things that when you are living in a patriarchal society, when men are sort of dictating what we're watching or what's being put on, can get short shrift, right? People don't respect it as much because that's seen as being sort of weak, sort of focusing on emotion and relationships. Although, I think we would all argue like it's one of the most important things, ever. It's the foundation of everything. And so I think now, for whatever reason, I mean, we want to talk about pandemic, what was, the 4 years of political stuff, whatever, we are leaning into sort of these stories about people in their lives. And I think what's really interesting is that if you talk to a lot of like movie writers or movie people who like, 10 years ago would have been like, oh, TV, no, they are now all coming back to TV. They want to write for TV because they want to write these long, epic, where they have time. They now realize I can tell this story in like 6 episodes and take my time. And what stretching the story out inevitably means is they go into details about relationship stuff. They go deeper than just, action driven plot. The Last of Us, like I know everyone, I'm obsessed with this show. And I know people are probably watching it, fanboys, people who played the game, are watching it expecting it to just be the game, but that's not what they're doing. They're telling the actual human relationship story behind all of the other stuff that's happening. And so I'm here for it. Like they're doing the work that we do. They can get better. Some people can get better at the romance, but I think what we're seeing is people diving into the relationships and realizing that that part matters.
I was thinking, just again, in like, we could get into a whole thing on reality TV. Well, and also how that even rose because of the writer's strike and like all of that stuff, which I think we forgot about, and how now it's so prevalent. But there is also this, this other thing that's come out of it with the docuseries. And I was thinking about how like I loved watching RuPaul's Drag Race, but that is a competition show. So there is a lot of like manufactured drama on the part of the producers, like, oh, we're going to bring somebody back, or we're going to have a double elimination or whatever. And that got hard to watch sometimes. But there's this this show on HBO called We're Here, which is 3 of the drag performers from previous seasons who go around America and meet with LGBT community members and then put on a drag show there to just basically be like, yeah, we're here. Like we're here in this small conservative town and we exist and we're happy and we're living our lives. And it's so wonderful to watch because there also isn't the competition part of it, right? Where it really is just about like connecting and uplifting. and telling those stories, like you're saying. I've seen people talking about this golf one, and I was like,
Oh,
really?
it's so
Now I'm
good.
like,
It's so good.
let's try
I
it.
mean, you can hardly believe as you're watching it that this actually happened. And honestly, the way that they edit it is like, it's bananas because it's just, let me give you an example about editing in Physical 100, which I think is amazing. Physical 100, what I believe they did, whether intentionally or not, what they've done for this competition reality show is they leaned into tropes. Like they played David versus Goliath. They played enemies to teammates. They played, like, they lean into bring down the ones on top, and like everything is like, I mean, you're just kind of like I'm astounded by how they have created a story narrative that makes me like just so invested in what's happening with all of these. I just call them meatheads and meatheads, and it is it's bananas. That show really, like, the way that it's edited to be storytelling versus necessarily just the story being the competition, kind of like we were talking about with Dancing with the Stars, is it's that and the PGA one. I've just watched them both recently, and I'm watching now the new tennis one. It is it's really kind of blowing my mind, the editing, and it's actually making me kind of look at how I'm editing my book, because they're taking some really interesting ways of kind of crafting these relationships and how they're letting these relationships play itself out that I think are just could be interesting on page as well. So
Yeah. So we have like just over 5 minutes, and we have not gotten to most of the questions. I think that was like from the second question. We went off. But this is also why I was like, I have the questions, but I feel like we're just going to have a good conversation. So we have a question from the audience, so let's take that to make sure we get to it. And there goes my microphone. Teresa asked, can the panel recommend a good K-drama and a good telenovela, please?
Well, I will sit back.
I would say Business
start.
Proposal, because I feel like I know some of the other ones that you guys might say. So I'll say Business Proposal, which is a K-drama. And it hits every romance beat perfectly. Like, it is just such a rom-com, and has a really great secondary romance as well. And the thing that I love about it is that you can tell that the actors like know what they're there to do. Like, the guy shows up and he's like, I am going to do the slow motion walk through and run my hand through my hair. The way that I style my hair changes over the course of the season to show that I'm opening up more. Like, it hits every beat. And then for a telenovela,
it's a contemporary. Business Proposal is contemporary, and it's fake dating.
Mistaken Identity.
Kind of Mistaken Identity.
Yeah, it's super cute. And then for telenovela, Adriana will have more, but I just started Café con Aroma de Mujer, which has William Levy, and like,
that's one of my favorite ever.
It's so like he's like the gorgeous son of the like coffee magnate or whatever, and she's like this beautiful woman who just has like a smudge of dirt on her face and picks coffee. Okay. But it's great, and it's it is hitting those like kind of childhood like moments that I felt like watching soap operas, watching telenovelas that my grandmother had on. It's like reminding me of those. So Susan, go ahead and make some recs.
Oh gosh. Okay. So this is really hard because whenever someone says, oh, can you recommend a K-drama? It's much like, can you recommend a book? It's really, there's different genres. There's fantasy, there's sci-fi, historical, contemporary. But I will recommend for intro to K-drama, something easy to watch. True Beauty is a contemporary love triangle, childhood friends reunited, but they didn't know they were friends to lovers. It has really good messaging about beauty and finding your self-worth. It's really beautiful and has some of the most beautiful stars in it. So I think that's a very easily digestible one that is fun to watch. That would probably be my recommendation for romance readers.
Deanna, you're up.
I have two. One is, well, okay, I'm gonna say this so Café con Aroma de Mujer. Andrew is my husband is like climbing on the heater. I have well, Café con Aroma de Mujer, I have one comment. The 1994 version is slightly superior in my opinion to the William Levy one. There's a Mexican production and there's a Colombian production, and the Colombian production I think is the best one, but the second one is very good too.
Okay.
And
I'm watching the one that showed up on Peacock, and I was like, oh wow, they have all of these telenovelas on.
I doubt they have the 1994 one like available on the streaming services. But for K-drama, I have When My Love Blooms. I watched that one, with my mom when she was visiting the last time. My mom is like obsessed with K-dramas in like a big way. And because timeline, it's like one have been kids and then they like reunite as adults, and she's like a activist and kind of has like given everything up for her like ideals and principles, and he's like a CEO, but like anyway, it's really good. It's honestly like some of like the best like time slip that I've ever watched. Like the back and forth between the past and the present is done super well. So that's my recommendation.
Also really great because it's older love couple. They're
yes,
like
it's an
in their
older
40s
couple
when they fall in love. Yeah.
Yes, it's really good. I mean, it's like
It's my mom's favorite.
It's like incredible what they pack into like I don't know, 16 episodes. And then for telenovela, my favorite telenovela of all time is called Corazón Salvaje, and he's a pirate. And there's a few like versions of it. My favorite is the 1995 one with Eduardo Palomo, and it's like he is like the bastard child of the man that owns like the land in Yucatan, and then he goes and becomes like this like pirate. It's historical, and it's like set in like the 1700s or something, but it is phenomenal.
I have a quick question. Do telenovelas all have subtitles too, like K-dramas?
They do. Like now they do. Like you can find them on YouTube, and they all have subtitles.
Okay, cool.
And so real quick, we're at 8 o'clock already. Tracy, if you have a romance TV show rec that you think is getting the romance right.
Yes. The show is on Amazon Prime. It's called Upload. I love this show so much.
Oh, I'm gonna watch it.
Yes, it is. It's like set like in the future, like 2030 something or whatever. And so it's the idea that humans can upload their consciousness into like a digital afterlife. And so this one young guy, played by Robbie Amell, who is so hot, is killed unexpectedly. And for some reasons, he ends up having his consciousness uploaded to this like really swanky digital afterlife. And each person gets customer service recs that are called angels, who sort of like tend to their needs. And so he ends up falling for his angel, and it's my favorite. I love that show. I think it's great. There are already 2 seasons in, and so the third one I'm hoping will come soon.
It's really funny too.
It is. It's really funny. It's a commentary on like a lot of things, wealth inequity, tech taking over our life, environmental stuff. It's a lot of that stuff too, but I just think sort of how they did the romance, the tension, the stretching it out, all worked really well for me.
Wow. And Robbie Amell is very good looking.
He is. He's Stephen Amell's cousin, the guy who plays Arrow.
Yes. Talk about a family reunion. I would be at that one. Barbecue for 3.
I feel like we could definitely do a part 2 because I still had so many questions and so many shows that I wanted to recommend and talk about. But we are at the end. So really, really, really brief. Tell us your latest book releases, what you have coming out next, and where to find you online. Adriana, go first.
I have my latest was On the Hustle, came out in the fall, and it's a contemporary. And my next book is An Island Princess Starts a Scandal. It's the second book in the Leona series, which is the historical, and it comes out in May 30th.
And where to find you?
Mostly on Instagram at La Adriana Herrera, and my website, AdrianaHerreraRomance.com.
Susan?
My book is Soulmates. It's out now. And then my next book is called The Name Drop. That drops on September 12th this year. You can find me at Susan Lee Writes on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and you can email me at susanleewrites@gmail.com.
Tracy?
My latest was American Royalty. The sequel, The Duchess Effect, comes out in July. You can find me tracy.livesey on Instagram, and my website tracylivesey.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter where I talk about TV and books every month. So
And my latest release was Take the Lead. Oh, are we gonna do a screenshot? Let's see.
Oh gosh, I'll do one. Hold on. Okay.
That was my latest release. It's out now. It's in paperback. The audiobook is coming March 28th, and it's the same narrator as my Primas of Power books. My next release is the third book in the Primas of Power series, Along Came Amor. Do not believe the release date that is listed anywhere. We will update that. And you can sign up for my newsletter at alexisdaria.com. I also talk about television and books every month at the end of each newsletter. And I am most active on Instagram at Alexis Daria. So thank you all so much for joining me
Thank
tonight.
you.
Thanks everyone for tuning
So
in.
fun.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Love Sweet Arrow. Thank you, Love Sweet Arrow. You can buy all of our books through Love Sweet Arrow on their website as well. They also have, I believe, signed book plates if you want to buy Take the Lead through them. And I think we're good, right?
Ooh, bye.
Happy Friday.